Hello everyone, and welcome to Social Work 300. My name is Jordan Maynard, and I'll be your instructor for this course. I'm excited to start this course journey with you. This week, I wanted to provide you with a small lecture to supplement your readings and learning materials. Today, we are going to lay the groundwork for our course by introducing three concepts that are central to social work and will be central to the course. These concepts are diversity, intersectionality, and social justice. Let us begin with the first concept, diversity. What is diversity? Simply put, diversity is the fundamental fact that people are different from one another. But it's so much more than what you might see at first glance. We're talking about differences in obvious things like race and ethnicity, but also differences in gender, sexual orientation, age, and physical abilities. And diversity also includes less visible differences, like a person's religion, their socioeconomic status, and even their unique neurobiological makeup, which we call neurodiversity. The key takeaway is that diversity is not just about a few categories. Diversity is the vast spectrum of human difference that, when brought together, enriches our society in countless ways. So now that we have a better understanding of what diversity is, the next logical question is, why is diversity important? The reason diversity is important is really quite simple. Diversity is a powerful force for personal, collective, and societal well-being. First, let's consider the ethical imperative. In social work, we are guided by a strong set of values. The National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics outlines several principles that directly relate to diversity. The principle of social justice mandates that social workers challenge social injustice and advocate for all people. This not only requires us to appreciate diversity and to understand it, but to actively fight for the rights of marginalized and oppressed groups. We also have an ethical responsibility to understand and respect cultural diversity and be knowledgeable about the function of human relationships. In essence, our profession is founded on the moral obligation to value every individual's dignity and worth, regardless of their background. Beyond the ethical duty, diversity is also important because it brings immense practical benefits. Think about your own life. Are all your friends and colleagues exactly the same? Probably not. You likely have friends and colleagues from different backgrounds, genders, belief systems, and orientations. In fact, if all of our friends were exactly the same, our interactions would probably be very boring. And that's because having a diverse circle of friends and colleagues exposes us to new ideas, different ways of thinking, and fresh perspectives. And research confirms this, showing that a diverse social network is directly linked to personal happiness and success. You can find more about that in this week's readings. On a larger scale, this also holds true not only for individuals, but for organizations and businesses in regards to success. Studies have repeatedly found that companies with diverse leadership teams are more innovative, more creative, and more financially successful. For example, research on top firms on the S&P 1500 list recently found that companies with female representation in top management experienced an increase of $42 million in firm value. Other studies on national banks showed that increases in racial diversity were clearly related to enhanced financial performance. So in conclusion, diversity is important, one, because it's ethically mandated, it's an ethical imperative, it's about doing the right thing. However, at the same time, diversity is important not just for doing the right thing, but it's also for being more effective and more successful in our interactions, in our personal growth, and in the organizations and businesses that we're a part of. The challenge and the cognitive jolt. Now let's be realistic. Interacting with people who are different from us isn't always easy. In fact, at times it can feel awkward, and it might lead to moments of friction or discomfort. But I want to argue that the discomfort and the friction that we sometimes feel when interacting with people who are unlike us or different from us, I should say, that can actually be a good thing. That feeling of discomfort that we sometimes get is what we call a cognitive jolt. And you'll read more about this in your this week's readings. But think about the cognitive jolt in terms of a workout. When you exercise, you fatigue a muscle, and you get what's called DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. You get soreness in that muscle from working it out. And that soreness, that discomfort you feel, is a sign that your body is slowly getting stronger. In the same way, that cognitive jolt, that friction that we feel, is a signal that our mind is being challenged. When we're forced to step outside of our comfort zone, and when we're forced to step outside of our familiar ways of thinking, we have to work harder. We're pushed to question our own assumptions. We have to consider new ideas. And in doing so, we have to become a more flexible and a more adaptable problem solver. This friction, or pain, or discomfort, this cognitive jolt that we get, is what leads to the gain of personal and intellectual growth. So now that we understand what diversity is, why it's important both ethically and in terms of success individually and as a business, and we understand that it can be difficult at times, we can now answer the question, how do we actually cultivate diversity? How do we practice it in our own life? And practicing or cultivating diversity starts with intentionality. The first thing we need to do is we need to practice mindfulness. Now, keep in mind, we'll be talking more about this concept of mindfulness in regards to implicit and explicit bias next week. But what that means, practicing mindfulness, it means becoming aware of our own personal biases. So you see, we all have unconscious biases or implicit biases. It's part of being human. And the goal isn't to pretend that we don't have them or to suddenly try to get rid of them all, but it's to acknowledge that we do have them so that we can learn to work to counteract them. And again, we'll talk more about implicit biases in next week, Module 2. The second step to cultivating diversity is to embrace the contact hypothesis, which we'll read more about in this week's readings. And the contact hypothesis is a well-researched idea that simple, meaningful contact with people from different backgrounds who are different from us, having this contact regularly, helps us to reduce our own prejudice. So, to cultivate diversity, we need to make an effort to connect with and befriend people who are different than us. And finally, the last step to cultivating diversity is being vulnerable. Being willing to share your own story and being active, empathetic listener when other people are sharing theirs. True relationships are built on an openness and a willingness to understand each other's experiences. This leads us to our second key concept, intersectionality. Intersectionality is a powerful framework that helps us understand the complexity of identity. It was a term coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw to explain how different parts of a person's identity don't exist in isolation. Instead, they overlap and interact in ways that create unique experiences of both privilege and oppression. For example, Kimberly Crenshaw provides an example of a black woman doesn't just experience racism and sexism as two separate things. She experiences a unique form of discrimination that is intershaped by the intersection of both of those identities, being black and being a woman. Her experience is more than just the sum of its parts. And understanding intersectionality is crucial because it helps us move beyond a single issue focus. It allows us to see the full complex picture of a person's life. It reminds us that different individuals within the same group may face vastly different challenges. For example, a woman of color and a white woman may have completely different experiences in the workplace. Or a person who is gay and also has a disability might face challenges that are unique to them because of those intersecting identities. By using an intersectional lens, we can create solutions to social problems that are more effective and truly inclusive because they recognize and address the specific challenges that people face at the intersection of their various identities. What is social justice? Now let's connect diversity and intersectionality to the core purpose of every social work course. Social justice. Social justice is the pursuit of a fair and equitable society where everyone has equal rights, opportunities, and access to resources. The United Nations defines social justice as a core principle for peace and prosperous coexistence, aiming for a world where societies are based on equality, respect for human rights, and the inherent dignity of every person. It's about recognizing that systems and institutions can create unfair advantages for some and disadvantages for others, and working to correct that imbalance. The social worker's role in social justice. In the field of social work, social justice isn't just a theory. It is our central mission and ethical responsibility. The National Association of Social Workers, the NASW, highlights that social workers pursue social change on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed groups. This means that we are actively involved in addressing systemic issues like poverty, unemployment, and discrimination. Our goal is to ensure that all people have access to information, services, and opportunities that they need to thrive, and a meaningful voice in the decisions that affect their lives. The link between the concepts. To put it all together, let's see how these concepts connect. Diversity is the reality of human differences. Diversity reminds us that we are all different. Intersectionality is the framework for understanding the complex and layered nature of those differences, reminding us that these differences don't exist in isolation. And finally, social justice is the action we take, the work we do, to ensure that everyone is treated fairly and has an equal chance to succeed, regardless of their intersecting identities. These three concepts are fundamentally connected and will be the foundation for everything that we discuss in this class. In conclusion, diversity is our starting point. Intersectionality is how we understand the journey, and social justice, true equality, is our destination. I encourage you to carry these ideas with you through your readings this week, through the videos this week, and throughout all our assignments in class. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.